All right. Good morning to many of you, and good afternoon to some of you on the East Coast. My name's Ethan, and today I'll be taking you through this webinar, which is a bit of a preview, so to speak, of Sybiz 24. So we've got a lot to get through, so we're going to be blitzing through as much as we can, try and cover a lot of content. We probably won't have time at the end to cover any live questions, but of course, if you do have any, by all means, flick them through the little Q&A in the webinar interface that you should have now. Just make sure, please, that you do include your email address so that we can get back to you if we don't get to you during the webinar. Some of our friendly staff members are on hand right now to answer some of your questions. Quick little schedule of what we're going to go through today. A couple of things common to both Vision and VisiPay softwares, then some VisiPay specific items. And we're going to just split Vision up into the core desktop software, some of the Vision apps, and then service. So those of you who are only here for VisiPay, obviously once that's done, feel free to get on with the rest of your day. And then obviously people who aren't interested in service can also make tracks as we get into that. And just a quick note that whilst Sybiz 24 is out right now, this presentation was created before that, so all the screenshots are from a pre-release version. So obviously big to have a look at is going to be the what's new and the landing pages for Sybiz 24. As always, we always recommend having a look at the what's new in particular to see what is new. Minimum SQL, we just wanted to quickly highlight this one because it is the same as last year, but some of you obviously will be on an older version of the software, 22 or before. So if you do try and go to 23 or above, including 24 without having SQL 2017 or greater, you're going to hit problems. So definitely keep that in mind. SQL 22 is compatible with Sybiz 24, and being the latest release is what we recommend. Quickly, a little common new feature to both Vision and VisiPay is delineating user access to desktop or mobile. You've got to have at least one. If you do create a user, you obviously can't create a user that's just can't access anything. That'd be quite pointless. But for example, if you've got someone who you might want to access just ESS for VisiPay, but you don't want them accessing the front end of VisiPay, this is just an easier method instead of having to create a hodgepodge of security rights. You can just say, no, can't log into the desktop. Absolutely not. What is each of them? So desktop is, the front end of the software. And then mobile in the Vision context is the web API and the apps, and VisiPay is the ESS, but also the ESS app as well. So if there's any additional restriction that you need to have on your users, that's now doable. Let's kick on with a bit of VisiPay 24, a few little enhancements to cover. First one is payslip emails. So those were introduced in 23, but it was a bit of a pain to change them. So you can now do it yourself through the change details feature. Front end, ESS, and the app all doable, and you can change that payslip email accordingly. We have now turned on support for child support in the STP2 context. There's deduction types, so specifically the child support deduction and child support garnishee deduction types, which you can now apply to payslips accordingly. It is important to use these deduction categories to make sure they're being reported accordingly, because otherwise Services Australia may start breathing down your neck. However, in regards to which one should you use, a deduction or a garnishee, that's going to depend on what Services Australia tells you. When something like this comes up, you should be given some documentation as to whether it is a deduction or garnishee, and just follow the bouncing ball from there. Some of you might be downloading these slides later, so there's a couple of quick links. You can obviously do a bit of Googling to find these links as well. These are obviously just from Services Australia. And there's going to be a YouTube video as well, which will cover off some similar ground. And there's also a few miscellaneous bits and pieces, importing leave approval groups against employees, The allowing of surname-only employees, this particularly relates to persons who only go by one name, and the appropriate methodology according to the ATO is to put that in the surname field. So if someone does go by one name from their culture, now supported. TFN declaration export, we do want to just highlight this one in particular, because obviously removing something's a bit spooky, but when it comes down to it, it's just not a necessary feature anymore, because all the information that the TFN declaration used to do now just goes through STP. So it's less to do from your perspective as employees. Quick little bit of selection defaulting improvement regarding the end of financial year finalization event, the employee income statement, as we call it, and better ordering of leave in ESS. Previously, it was just based on when you pop the leave requests in, but now it's actually going to be sortable. And obviously, there is quite a bit more. So, what's new page? Definitely, they're going to be the first place to go. And there's how you get to it: application menu, documentation, what's new, in case you close it after opening it for the first time. So to those of you who are just interested in VisiPay, that's a pretty quick one for you. And thank you very much for your time. But obviously, if you are interested in Vision as well, as said, we're just going to be delineating this by not service or apps, and then the app stuff, then the service stuff afterwards. So kicking us off, we do have a couple of video clips that have been released in relation to some of these new features in 24. That's combining a service request, which I said we'll be getting to later, some stock take improvements, and the, as referred to earlier, child support for STP2. So we're just going to blitz through a bunch of things that we think are going to be pretty useful to just cover in a visual webinar sense. But obviously, once again, I'll be saying this later, the What's New page has a lot more textual detail for those of you who are interested in said detail. So we got a little bit of an improvement to the job analytic. So in 23.10, which is the previous version, if you were looking at the analytic and you'd done some costs, then you invoiced them out, it was a bit hard to marry them up because all the costs were always attributed to customer none. So it's very hard to actually marry up exactly what costs and income attained to a particular customer. But in 24, that has now been improved. So if you are looking at a customer level, the customer now has the costs associated accordingly, as in this quick example. There is also, because of this, we've needed to consider the idea of head office and branch office. So we have a new concept. So this is how, again, this is a very similar example to before, 23.10, it's completely separated. In the case of this, Beiersdorf is the head office of the job customer, which is the immediate group. In 24, even if you do use just customer name, it's still going to be split up because the head office is getting invoiced, but the costs are being attributed to the actual job customer. However, there is a new field. Instead of customer name, we can actually use job customer name. So by doing that, it's going to group specifically by the assignee of the job. And then once again, the costs and income get married up nicely. If you're not using head offices and branch offices, probably doesn't matter whether you've got customer name or job customer name on your analytic. But if you do, maybe you do want to split them up, maybe you don't, but that option's now there. For the accounting boffins out there's a new cost of job override control. You have to have purchase accrual control set up against your job group, and I want to specify it's only job group, so you can't use this new account against stages or cost centers. Definitions there, it's just straight from the help file, and details generally that relates to the product posting. I'm just going to run through a very quick example. So we've got two jobs here. On the left, we've got one that's not using the override, and that's sort of a very basic periodic posting method. So that's sort of very basic postings. And then on the right, we've got the full accrual system, which is what you want to use if you are going to use these sorts of overrides. You don't want to mix and match too much. So we've done $100 of job cost. There's not too much of a difference here. The only difference being inventory variances and accrual. But once we get to the invoice, we can see there the job group, cost of job override coming into play there. To be honest, I think the better example is on the next screen. I just wanted to do that holistic comparison as well. So the only difference here, both scenarios in this case are using the full accrual system. And the only difference is that the override is in play on the right screenshot. You'll notice instead of going to cost of jobs at the product group level, let's go into that override account. Contact screen. This is one that's been quite static for a while, but it's now just a little bit more filterable and customizable. So you'll notice that new customize button, and you can now turn on or off particular fields and sort by particular fields. It's also noteworthy that you can sort by a field that you don't actually display. So for example, here I've got primary contact on the grid, and it is sorted by primary contact. So the primary contact is coming up first. But look, when it comes down to it, it's not really pertinent to have a Boolean checkbox against every single contact. So even if we just get rid of it, we're still going to be filtering by that primary contact. So it's the same order of contacts. It's just not there. So that can be helpful in regards to if you have particular pieces of information that you want to get out of the contacts grid, and a lot of it's just superfluous. This is a cool new feature, disputed customer transactions. So if you're sent an invoice off to a customer and they go, nah, I'm not paying this because something's wrong, and you've got to have a discussion about that, you can now mark this transaction as disputed. So that's sales invoices, job cost invoices, and advanced service invoices. There are some defaults to control the behavior of exactly what that does, which are on the next slide. The main thing is going to be, by default, they can still pay the invoice, because we're not going to, I doubt there are going to be many of you out there who don't want to receive money from customers, but things like finance charges and so forth can be tinkered with to just say, no, okay, we're going to have a legitimate dispute here. We need to have some conversations, so we don't want to slug you with interest on this bill because you're not paying it, because it's perfectly legitimate that you're not paying it, because we're having these discussions. So once you mark it as disputed against different inquiries and so forth, it'll look like this with that lock there, so you can easily tell that it is disputed and locked as such. You can get to the disputed transaction screen by either looking at the customer inquiry, and you can see it up the top right there, or it's actually a management grid as well. And here we can see those defaults down the bottom, so excluding it from finance charges, customer statements, or offsets. So again, you might want to exclude it from statements because you think it's a legitimate dispute, or you might want to go, no, I don't care that we're having a dispute over this. We're still going to show it on the statement because you've still got to pay it eventually, and maybe something will happen down the line. So moving on to customer search. For those of you familiar with product search, this is going to be extremely similar and familiar to you. But for those of you who aren't, it's essentially a feature which is just a different method of finding customers and uses a searching-based criteria as opposed to just the first character and then moving on. There's some customization support here as well. So when it comes down to it, you really can make these searches work however you need them to. So perhaps you've got particular criteria within your customer list that you want to search by. We've got some defaults there, but you might want to just say, no, I don't want to use any of these defaults. I want to search by some custom field I've set up. You can absolutely do that. And there's also some breakpoints there, which you can insert your own code in, whether written by yourselves, your business partners, to customize the behavior of how those searches work even further. A couple of examples here quickly. So this is a simple customer code one. Using the default behavior, which is just what's next. I've got a bunch of customers that have start with the letter C, and they're all going to come up if I hit C, type in a C and then hit tab. We'll focus on C004. You'll notice it's the only one with a telephone or an email. None of this is going to be particularly surprising, but just want to run through it regardless. So they've got a code, they've got a name, they've got a telephone, they've got an email. So if I type in their phone number, no worries, that comes up. So instead of needing to type out, oh, what's their code? It's like, oh, what's your number? Tap, 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 bang, selects the customer. Same thing with the name. Obviously, if there were multiple customers in my list that had the word crave, started with the word crave, that would pop up with the options like the lists like before. But in this case, I've only got one. And then similarly, the email, instead of needing to remember that they're C004 instead of 003, just type in the email and find them immediately. So again, that's heavily customizable. And if it is something where you've got a complex set of codes on your customers, you need to find them a bit easier. Again, you can tinker to your heart's content and figure out something that's really efficient for you and your users. Here's one that'll please the custom field enjoyers out there. Obviously, the ideal scenario is that you've got a few custom fields split over a few tabs in your transaction headers, but obviously sometimes you do have a lot of information where it is completely pertinent to have it on the same tab. So now you can see here we've got this little up arrow, and if we click that, it's just going to collapse the header. So once you do everything you need to do in your header, you can just collapse that away, and then you can much easier see all the lines on your transaction. That's applicable across, I believe, all transactions, at least in the sales and purchase. This is just a sales invoice as an example. This isn't actually a new feature, but it's something that I didn't even know existed until a couple of weeks ago. And I thought this was awesome, so I definitely had to include it. It's pretty recent, just not new to 24. If you're on any of the main grids, these are going to be our default grids. I've got jobs here as an example. And instead of clicking, double clicking, which will send you to the inquiry screen, you give it a quick control double click. That's actually going to take you straight to the edit screen. So instead of needing to right click, I know a lot of people are very, they don't want to use the right click menu. I'm a big fan of using keyboard shortcuts, avoiding right click where possible. So this is a great little quick and easy shortcut to get you to edit screens faster. New button here on, I believe, almost all transactions. At the very least, it's definitely available across the software. It's the ability to press a button on the functions ribbon, wherein got to process a transaction and recreate documents as if you were just pressing process for the first time. So instead of needing to preview a particular transaction document and then reproduce it, then you've got to do it with the other three as well. You can just one button and it's going to bang out your documents. It is worth noting that you do have to be a bit careful because it's going to use whatever settings are enabled at the time. So if it's company user output, whatever the case may be, if that's going to, for example, send documents to your printer and you don't want to do that, you might want to do a specific preview instead. But if you do just want to recreate a bunch of documents at once, button's there and it's quick, it's simple, and away you go. So this was intimated earlier with those YouTube videos, but there are some improvements to the stock take creation process, particularly additional filtering on stock take creation and additional options in relation to tracking. I'll skip over reading all of it. We'll go straight to some visuals. So down the bottom here, this used to be where the tracking options were, but you'll notice there are now these filters, products with 0 quantity on hand and products with no transactions since last stock take. Which can be very handy little filters to omit a ton of products which just are not relevant to your account whatsoever. Maybe you do want to include them, but honestly, I think a lot of people probably don't. And then also tracking. So this is, again, very similar idea, a bit more fluidity of selection. So mostly you can do exactly the same as before, but there's just a couple of extra options as well in order to further create a stock take document that's only going to include products that are relevant to exactly what you want to do. Quick and easy one that's going to be very good for many of you, the ability to transact over 5 general ledger years out of the box. Previously it was 3, now it's 5, so you can go back even further in time if you do need to do a small little correction, something from a couple of years ago. As always, we are continuously looking to improve how our security model operates within the software. This is just a small little improvement that we think is going to be very potent, which is the ability to create read-only rights to particular transactions. Previously, it was quite difficult to create just read-only, but now it's going to be a lot more streamlined in regards to this access abilities. So instead of needing to give someone process or add or edit, you can just give them the access, and now they can see a sales invoice, but they can't necessarily do anything to it or whatever transaction you happen to be looking at. Further than that, we've also put some improvements in relation to role management. So this is in relation to actually managing roles and how they are assigned to users. So there's two small improvements here. Firstly, on the users grid, we've got the roles column. So that is a quick and easy method to see who has what role, and obviously that auto filter row that you can see on the screen there, that can be used to filter down to say, oh, who's got CRM manager rights, who's got purchaser rights, whatever the case may be. And the second thing is an easier method from the roles screen to actually give a role to users. So previously, if you had a new role, you'd make it, set up all the settings. Okay, now you have to go to Bill and give Bill the role. Then you'd have to go to Keith and go Keith the role. No, now you can just do that from the user's screen. From the role screen, I should say, on the user's ribbon, and just easily tick and flick, and away you go. So it's far more streamlined in that regard. That wraps up the main, the big ticket items that we wanted to cover that don't relate to apps or service. And there's a few miscellaneous ones we wanted to just quickly capture. So purchase requisition management, some particular scenarios, there were some performance hits that we've now tidied up. Job enhancements, site address. So like, if your job relates to a customer that's got an address in the CBD of a city, but the site's out 4 suburbs over, you don't want to send things to the CBD because a pallet of bricks in the CBD is doing nothing. So a site address for deliveries and so forth. Also custom fields on job cost transactions, custom fields on sales picks, merging multiple accepted quotes from a given customer into one order. So that was something that was a bit of a restriction previously, that you had to sort of go one-to-one from quote to order, but now that restriction has been lifted. Another addition to purchase and sales management grids, which is a new column for who created an order. So this is mostly for filtering purposes. The easiest example I can think of is Bill deals with sales orders, and you only want Bill to deal with his sales orders. So it's a lot easier to just filter down to Bill's sales orders based on who created it. For those of you who have a lot of breakpoints, the ability to import export is obviously going to be something that streamlines things quite a bit. Restricting elsewhere as a stock transfer location. So now only particular, managers, for example, would have the ability to magic goods away or in. And of course, as always, a few general performance improvements throughout database structure as a whole. About it. But obviously, once again, what's new page definitely worth having a look at. And as always, we're always working on new things for mid-year releases and so forth. So definitely keep an ear to the ground for further new features as they come along. So a few application-specific items before we move on to service. I do just want to note these are all from my phone, which is an Android. So if you are using iOS, things might look a bit different. But yeah, image support for jobs and some barcode improvements. Let's kick right in. So the first thing is image support. So previously the job app, you'd open up a job and maybe there was a picture, I don't know, a blueprint or something that the boss wanted you to have a look at, and you were stuffed. You couldn't get it. So you'd have to get it sent the other way. But now we can both add and view from the app. So if we go into a job, and you'll notice there is now a new Pics tab ribbon, and we can add to it. So you can add based on the camera or something you've already saved earlier. And then once you've got that, it's going to be inside that job container, which is viewable from both the desktop side of things and the mobile side of things. In relation to barcodes, there's two things we want to highlight. The first is that on any product picker, and this is throughout the apps, this is just the sales app, but again, rolled out throughout. Product pickers now have the ability to actually scan a barcode. Previously, this was quite restricted to the stock app, but you can now quickly barcode scan any product. So if you happen to be out in the warehouse, zap, barcode is selected immediately. And the second thing is this don't use camera for scanning. So right now, our general barcoding method just pops open the camera on your phone and then zaps accordingly. But one thing that was noted was that a lot of you out there happen to use the handheld little scanner guns. So you've got it's Android base usually, and it's got like an actual zapper on the end that you're going around with. Now, obviously, you can't use the camera for that, but we did notice that mostly they just output text based on the barcode. So if you tick the don't use camera for scanning box, whenever you actually go to scan a barcode now, it's just going to come up with a little text box. And the idea is you then zap the barcode accordingly with your handheld device. It pops in the barcode accordingly, and away you go from there. So there's now that support available for those handheld scanner devices. So we're about to kick into service. So look, if you're interested in service, absolutely stick around. There is an absolute ton of content to get through. But obviously, to those of you who have absolutely no interest in service, we will wish you all the best for the rest of the day, and thank you for your time. But we did want to just quickly announce at this time a customer webinar series. There's a lot of features in the software. There's an absolute bucket. I still learn about things, most weeks because there's just such a large bucket of features in the software. And we wanted to just create a series of webinars throughout 2024 that just highlights some key parts of the software that are going to help you save time, be more efficient, so on and so on. So the first one's going to be at the beginning of February. Once again, it's a Friday at this 11:30 a.m. time, at least in Adelaide. And the first topic up is going to be management grids. We think there's a lot of power in them. And to those of you who are already using them, fantastic. And to those of you who aren't, we're hoping to convince you to. So there will obviously be more communications surrounding that shortly as we reach into the new year. But please do look forward to that. I'm very, very keen to deliver some more content to you all on how you can save time in your day. So to those of you who aren't interested in service, as said, thank you for your time. But those of you who are, strap in because we've got quite a bit more to get through. So we're going to split this again up. A lot of splitting up of content today into desktop and service apps. So a lot of the service app stuff does flow from the desktop improvements that we've made, but absolutely pivotal to get through both. So meter servicing run improvements. Previously, the meter servicing run was a very all or nothing. You generate lines, you could do things, but it was a bit tricky. So we've got through a few improvements in the software to make those meter servicing runs just a bit smoother. First thing is filtering. So you'd be selecting this filtering before generating lines, and it's just going to let you generate a more specific set of lines. So maybe you only want 10 customers worth of meters. Maybe you only want all your forklift range 1 or your car range 2. And that's a bit easier to do now by applying some filters. Once you've generated lines, we've now got a bit more quick and easy methods to select or deselect all, and a bit of an easier method to delete lines that you're just not interested in. And also moving on that theme, the ability to actually delete groups worth of lines. So previously, if you wanted to delete, say, I don't know, let's say a meter happened to generate annual computer maintenance here, and you had, instead of 2, let's say it was 20 rows, you'd have to go through each one individually. And look, it's not too bad, but if you're doing it all the time, it can get a bit painful. Now you can just select the group, delete the group, bang, they're all gone. If you're very, very, very keenly watching, however, you would have noticed these 2 new buttons. I only showed one in the previous screenshot, but group requests by customer and group request by service item. Now, what do we mean by group requests? Let's perhaps come back to these buttons because it's going to make no sense if I explain them now. As has been intimated though, grouping service requests is now a feature. So it allows multiple service requests to be represented by one if you're linking them together. So it's sort of like a parent-child relationship. And what we've done is we've actually called the parents containers. So a particular service request is going to be the container for a series of other request. So the main theme here is if you have, so I've used a gym example. So let's say you maintain a series of gym equipment. Right now, if you want to make sure that your requests are appropriately against service items, so you can report against those service item repairs accordingly, you'd have to make 20 different service requests for however many pieces of equipment are in that particular gym. And then you'd have to schedule each of those requests individually. And that's obviously a lot. It's a lot of work. Now, you'd still need to create all those requests, but you can now group them up against just the one request, which is going to be that container. And then from there, you've just got one item to schedule, one item to look at in the main part, and it's just going to be a lot easier to manage those bulk but very similar requests. I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to be repeating this a bit later, but it is very important to note you still need to create actions, service actions against each service request. Once again, this is because we still want to make sure that you're reporting accurately against each request and each service item. So, it might have taken you, let's say it's 3 exercise bikes, like in this example. It might have taken you 1 hour and no parts to repair the first one, but maybe 4 hours and many parts to repair the second one. And we don't want to just amalgamate all that together. We want it to be very clear. No, you just put a bunch of new parts in exercise bike 2. So actions still need to be done against each service request. The main advantages are scheduling and app workflows. Now, obviously, the next question is, how do you group service requests? First option is the most manual one. It can be useful for correcting, tinkering, so on and so forth. But look, for the day-to-day, we probably don't recommend it. That's going to be to come to your Edit Service Request screen. You're going to click this new Service Request tab. You're going to right-click in the white space in the empty part of the grid, and then just click Add. Away you go. If you had to do that for 10 or 12 requests, the tedium is going to get to you pretty quickly. So as said, can be useful for tinkering, but probably not recommended for the bulk of your work. This is one we probably expect to get a bit of a workout though, is grouping on the scheduler itself. So let's say I've got these 2 service requests here, service 1 and service 2, and I want to group them together. So I'm going to drag service 1 onto the scheduler, so at 10 a.m. And then we're going to drag up service 2 on top of it. Now, because they happen to be from different customers, it's actually going to prompt me. It's going to say, no, hang on, are you sure you want to do this? Because usually we're expecting linked service requests to be for the same customer, same work site, that sort of thing. It's just a prompt though, so you can say yes or no. And if we say yes, they're going to merge together. So you'll notice now that service 1 is double length in nature. And if we actually inquire on edit service 1 and go to that service request tab, we can see they are grouped together. So swinging back to the meter servicing run screen, you've probably guessed this one, but these do create grouped service requests based on whichever button you happen to press. The classic example, going back to our gym example, which we're going to be returning to quite a bit throughout the rest of this presentation, you've got, gym 1, and there's 20, 30 items that are all for this gym, annual services, weekly services, all sorts. Click group requests by customer. It's going to produce just one container, and then all the service requests are going to be linked to that container, grouped up accordingly. By the same token, there might be a ton of meters that are actually popping up against a particular set of items. So perhaps you're maintaining a larger item and there's a lot of different things that happen to be triggering at once meter-wise. So you might need to do, an oil change the spark plugs, and these are all separate meters. Obviously, what you do in reality is probably going to be different to my random examples. But then you can also group requests just by the actual service items themselves and create accordingly. So viewing these items, the main thing that we see is going to be going to the service request grid, and there is a new column there called container, which you can group by, and that's going to create these groups accordingly. And you can see there down the bottom with request 5, the group request, that it's got all those together in one single group. Now then, in regards to scheduling, because I did mention that is a big advantage, what this does is it takes this estimated work time. So this is a new field that you can set in a bunch of ways, and I'll come back to that in a second. So I've got this series of requests, which are all in group request, as you saw before. So there's 8 of them in total, and I'm not going to open all of them in visuals. You'll have to take my word for it. All of them have an estimated work time of 30 minutes. So we can see here that against the group request, it's now actually added all those together. Estimated work time is 4 hours. So I just need to drag one item onto my scheduler, and my intermediate technician now has 4 hours of work to do for the Acme Corporation. And once again, going to re-highlight this. Service actions are per request still. So I've got here this example of just the service action drop-down. The service requests, they're all still there to be selected, and you're going to need to do that separately. Now, we expect in a lot of cases, though, that's going to be done through the mobile app. We'll come back to that in just a bit. Now, in regards to invoicing these out, mostly it's the same. So you've got your 3 options: your service invoice run, which was already sort of batching things together, and your advanced service invoice, which is just called service invoice. All of these are going to be the exact same. So if you're doing advanced, you're still going to be doing it one by one per request, because obviously you've got a lot more fine-grained control there. However, the grouped service request sales invoice method has changed a bit, because you can now, when selecting the container request, the parent request, it's going to pop open all those child requests that are linked to it. And you can choose to include however many you want. So let's say for some reason you're invoicing out daily and you got through requests 1 through 4, you could just unselect 5, 6, 7 and worry about those tomorrow. In our case, though, we're going to include all of the requests, and we can see here by hitting OK, it's just popped all those SV lines on there, and it's brought in all our prices accordingly based on costs. And so costs and charge that have been brought in, and that invoice is ready to go, all batched up away to the customer. So a couple of things here. So the first thing is that estimated work time. So you can set that per request, but we probably anticipate this being more at a request template level. You know, you can generally expect that an exercise bike, to keep going back to our gym example, it's going to take 30 minutes to service. Weight machine might be 15 minutes. Treadmill might be an hour, whatever the case may be. But in regards to the request templates, that is actually going to do a bit of automation based on the service action template that you select. So I've got this service action template here, and we've got our junior technician doing 5 hours of labor in this template. So if we actually now pop that action template onto our request, you'll notice the estimated work time is actually automatically updated itself to be 5 hours. And that obviously applies to however long you put on your action template. But of course, if you're like, well, no, we're going to charge out 5 hours, but it's probably just going to take 4 from a scheduling perspective, it's of course overridable, as you would expect. Workflows. So we're going to change gears a little bit. We're now sort of moving into the app side of things. Workflows from a desktop perspective, they do nothing. From a functional perspective on the desktop, they do nothing. However, you must set them up on the desktop vision. The app itself only utilizes workflows. It can't set them up themselves. A workflow, essentially, we see it as a set of steps to be completed. It helps complete the tasks, but it also helps record and report critical information. So it might be making sure the serial number's correct, recording voltages on a piece of gear, just saying, hey, have you remembered to do this, that sort of thing. So it could be anything. It's very customizable, of course. And we're going to quickly work through just a very simple example. The key concept from a fundamentals perspective is going to be a workflow is made of stages, which is made of steps. So a workflow overall is like, work on treadmill, repair treadmill. Stage is going to be go to the location, call the customer, then maybe the actual work itself, then take some pictures of it, then get customer sign-off, that sort of thing. So those are going to be your stages. And then within each stage, there's going to be a step. So the easiest example is when working on the treadmill, the steps within that stage might be something like check belt, check treadmill belt, check electronics, record voltage, and so on and so forth. So you can see that each step can be a particular type. So you can just put in text, there can be check boxes, whatever the case may be. And stages also have action types. So the main ones are put up here. I'm not going to go through them individually because we're going to go through an actual example of each through the app itself. But the important thing to note is the action type. I didn't actually put up a screenshot for it, but you'll also notice just below action type, it's easier to see on the previous slide, is status on completion. So this will let you actually automatically set a service request to a particular status. So this might be work started, invoice ready. We probably don't expect you to go to complete because you still need to invoice out to the customer, but maybe you're doing a free service that you bundled in with a package. So in that case, yeah, it might be service complete. Whatever the case may be, is to an accurate status after each stage. You can pop on whatever status you'd like. So how do you assign a workflow to a service request? You can do it at an individual service request level, and you can see that selectable there. But once again, we do anticipate this being more used at a template level. So for a treadmill template, you can pop on the appropriate action template, pop on the appropriate mobile workflow, and that's going to flow through to requests as they get created. We're going to kick into the service app itself now. So most of everything we need to talk about on the desktop is all done. Now I'm going to switch to the mobile. Service app is out as of either yesterday or the day before. I honestly forget, but it is out right now. So if you do like what you see, by all means, give it a download. If you don't have the web API set up, get in touch with your business partner, get in touch with us, and between us, we will sort you out, get that all set up, and you'll be able to start using the service app as soon as possible. So general idea behind the app: support technicians on the move in completing your service, as said, as well as recording. Workflow interaction is going to assist with regards to interacting with service requests, so it can be done a bit more on the fly. The scheduler on the map are going to be there to assist in a much more broad sense with the technician's work. We're going to dive in with some visuals, but again, I'm going to repeat that note. Take it on an Android, so iOS might look a bit different. And of course, I was using a pre-release version to create this presentation, so there might be some small changes. Nothing too major, but there might be some small changes between what pictures I took and what you see in the app. So if there's anything that you take away from the next, hopefully 10 to 15 minutes, is when you launch the service app, go to the settings first, because the most important thing to do is set your staff setting. And that's who you are personally as a technician. So for the purposes of today's example, I will be the intermediate technician. But it's important as there are a lot of items within the app that tie into who you are as a staff member and labor rate and so forth and scheduling. So yeah, set your staff member, please do it. In regards to the scheduler, this is essentially just a visualization copy. You can't actually do anything on the mobile scheduler, but of course that's really the idea of the app. It's more to functionally complete the services. So this can quickly tell you, I've got it 1 at 11, 1 at 1 p.m, easy as you like. And then supporting that is going to be a map. So it's just going to list today's appointments. And you can see here we've got an appointment in Blakeview. And that's going to show on our map. In our example, we've only got the one addressed service request. But obviously, if you had 5 or 10, they're going to pop up as different dots around the map. And then you can click on the service request and maybe go, oh, how much work is this? Click on, do whatever you need to do. And then very, very quickly, these grids are completely self-explanatory. Save timesheets, save service actions. There's obviously the plus button up the top if you need to create new ones. But again, nothing too complex in either of these screens. Pretty self-explanatory. So service requests, of course, are going to be the bread and butter of the app. So first thing to note is filtering. So again, Everyone's going to use it differently, but we anticipate that scheduled is going to be the more common one. So you just click the little cone icon up the top right, then it's going to bring up the filter options. You can do unscheduled. Perhaps you might just be picking up odd jobs that haven't been particularly scheduled. Usually it's going to be, what appointments do I have today? What do I need to do? And that's going to bring that list right down to those two that we do have scheduled for us. Kicking back very quickly into the software, this is going to be our example workflow we're about to go through. So it's going to have 6 steps. Firstly, we're going to call a gym to service their treadmill. Then we're going to travel there, work on it, take some pictures of it, complete the work, and then get the gym to sign off. So that's going to be 6 steps, and they're all going to use different action types like I talked about before, and we're just going to have a look at what those look like. So the first 2 steps, so the first one on the left there is calling the gym. So this is a call customer action type, and you'll notice that it's automatically brought up the customer name, but more importantly, a mobile number, and there's a quick interface there to send a text message or call accordingly. You don't have to, go through another app. So you click call, hey, how's it going? I'm going to rock up in 30 minutes. Can you let me in, please? And if they don't respond, maybe you don't go. So we've also then got a couple of very quick checkboxes there. So checkbox for did the gym respond? And then just a text field to write down who's on duty. Is it Tim, Sally, whoever it might be. So then travel time to the gym. So you can type in start time and end time manually. Usually, though, we're going to expect people to actually use the timer. So there's a begin and reset, and pretty self-explanatory. And this is going to add travel time to what will eventually be a service action. If you set a different labor rate in the settings of the app for travel, so you might be like, oh, well, if I'm on site, I'm charging my full rate, but for travel, I only charge half rate. You can set that up so travel is a different rate. In our case, that's not what we've done, but however long it takes you to travel, that timer is going to set and save accordingly. Here we've just got another quick checkbox there. This is again an example of assisting with doing work. Is the toolbox in the van? Check. So moving on to work time. Time is exactly the same. Unsurprisingly, we're not going to reinvent the wheel just because it's a different type of timer. The idea being is you're going to get to the job, hit begin, start doing your work, and then when you're done, obviously press end. Once again, you can manually put in a start time and an end time, but we wouldn't anticipate that being usual. A couple of quick field types here. So a couple of reminders for steps, a quick text box to record the voltage, but then also a time field. We just wanted to highlight this one because it does actually bring up a more specific time picker as opposed to needing to type it in. So you do have those different options of field types. Pictures, so this is the pictures step. This is going to look exactly the same as the jobs app, funnily enough. So if you remember that from a few minutes ago, there's nothing different here. You've got to put at least one in. So if you do have this pictures step, you are forcing the technician to at least take a picture, whether they take a picture of the ground or, or the treadmill. Obviously, that's up to them, but they do have to at least put something in. Again, from camera or library, picture goes in. It's now against the service request. You can see it against the app as well, and away you go. Next, we have the service action. So once again, you do need to have at least one action before you're allowed to continue. Unsurprisingly, you press create action and it creates a service action. It's going to pop that little post up there to tell you that, yes, service action has been created, and then we can view it. If needed, you can make edits. So in our case, our action template has us using 1 tread and 6 mils. Maybe, we'll actually use 7 mils or use 2 treads, or you had to use some other special part that's not usually on the action template, not usually part of the service, but today it is. And then obviously, of course, our travel and our labor time. So in my case, I had 9 minutes of each, so put 9 minutes of each on, but that's obviously going to differ depending on what occurs in your particular scenario. And I'm just quickly flipping back to the desktop just to show, yes, this is our action template using 1 tread and 6 mils. And that service action has been saved accordingly. Now, your process might be different. You might have technicians on the road actually processing those service actions. You might say, hey, leave that to HQ. So you might not give them the permissions to process, leaving that accordingly to HQ. HQ might be tinkering with it in some way, adding lines, taking away lines, balancing charges, whatever the case may be. But that option is there, whether it's saving or processing. And of course, the actions in the system now ready to do what you'd like with. Final step is going to be customer sign off. So in this case, we've got this special button here, which is gym staff signature. It brings up, unsurprisingly, a little place where they can sign. So like you've probably, when you take in a package and the postie hands you the phone and asks you to do a scribble, which I always muck up. I'm sure plenty of people out there will. It lets you just type in, sorry, I shouldn't say type really, but draw whatever you like with your finger. That's going to give a quick signature. It's going to save into the database. You've got that little scribble there ready to go. So that sort of concludes our major example of a workflow. The main notes are, if you're setting it up at stage level, make sure you're progressing the service along. Primarily because we would expect people at headquarters to be filtering service requests accordingly. So if my job is just to process service actions, you might have a status that says action ready, as in that next note. So if I've got my grid open, I'm just going to filter by status action ready. And I'm not going to look at other ones. So if your workflow doesn't progress the request along to the appropriate stage, I'm not going to know I need to do my part of the job. So make sure those statuses are set accordingly. And as said, service actions, they might be saved, they might be processed. So make sure it's accordingly ready. Your service defaults are also going to come into play here as to what status is invoice ready and what isn't. So make sure that's all tickety-boo. As always, your internal discussion is going to assist with this. Your business partner is going to be able to assist you come up with a good workflow to make sure everything's spick and spam. So definitely reach out. And of course, there's absolute buckets of flexibility. So whatever you need to do can be done. All right, only a few more notes. So thank you all for your bearing with me here. We're just going to quickly, so we've got this screen up again, our service requests, but on this particular occasion, we're going to focus on this one, which is our group request from before. Now you'll notice here that it actually says 8 requests for the workout time of 4 hours. And like, whoop, skipped a step. And like before, that's got our group request and it's 7 child requests accordingly. Now in regards to the workflow, I didn't mention this column before, and that was very much on purpose, but it's the hide when linked column. Now the idea behind this is if I am a solo service request, if it's just the one item, I'm obviously going to need to do everything. If I'm just going to service one treadmill, I do need to call the gym. I do need to travel there. I do need to get sign off. But if I've say got 30 items, well, I don't need to travel there every time. I need to travel there once, and then I need to work on 30 treadmills. What this does is essentially this flag tells the system to say, hey, if I'm linked to a container, if I'm at a child request, ignore these stages, because the assumption is they're already completed by the container. And this is, generally speaking, what that looks like. So when you click into a container, if you've got stages that are hide when linked that are before other stages, it's going to say, hey, no, you've got to do those stages first. Makes sense because generally we're expecting that to be travel to site. You can't start working on something that's on site if you haven't traveled there. So we're going to force you to do those before work stages. So same stages as before, you're going to get those done, no worries. Once they're complete, it's then going to open up all those service requests. So you don't need to do them in any order. You might be doing exercise bike 3, then treadmill 1, then exercise bike 1, whatever works for the particular technician. And then once you click into a particular service request, it's going to kick you straight to that first stage that is not hide when linked, so the actual work step. And it's the same thing with after work stages. They're going to come up at the end, and you're not going to be able to do those until you've actually completed your work. Now, one thing I want to highlight, though, is this little one, which says stages complete is 0 of 1. The rest of them obviously have 3 stages because they're using the same workflow. What I wanted to do was actually just highlight you can have different workflows within a group. Now, this is obviously going to come in handy because the process of servicing a treadmill is, for obvious reasons, totally different than the process of servicing a weight machine or a exercise bike or anything else. So you can have those different workflows, and they could all have wide-wind linked stages. They could all not, whatever the case may be. For the sake of this example, I've just got a very, very simple one-stage, one-step workflow, just called different workflow. I've assigned that to child request 3. And then when we actually click on child request 3, it's just going to pop up with that different workflow accordingly. Now, in theory, you could have 20 different requests all grouped up together, and they could be 20 different workflows in theory. That flexibility is 100% there and available for you to use. So, summary therein. The app's driven by workflows primarily, and you're going to set those up in desktop vision. So you've got to set them up through desktop, not the app. You can create any number of workflows to suit your needs and assign them accordingly to service requests as you need. Combine those with request and action templates to further streamline your processes. We're going to expect templating to be very heavily used. It's just going to speed up your day. It's that simple. Estimated work time is a very important concept. Schedule accurately and accordingly make sure that everyone's where they need to be. Once again, I'm going to specify if there's anything you take out of today that's service related. If you load the service app, load the settings, make sure you set your staff member, because it's going to, if you don't, you're going to run into a whole world of trouble as you're trying to work through a workflow. And finally, make sure you use that mapping and scheduler in the app to make sure you can get where you need to be on the road much, much easier. And after a full hour, I thank you very, very much for your time as we have reached the end of this 24 webinar. So as said, if you did have any questions, hopefully some of them have been answered. I'll admit I haven't been looking at them by some of our helpful moderators. Thank you to them for helping out today. If they couldn't get back to you, just make sure you pop in a question, include your email, and we can get back to you when possible. From there, I will wish you all the best. There'll be further communications relating to our webinars of February and beyond. Those are going to be customer focused as well. So we hope to have your company then as well. For the moment, get in touch with your business partner, get upgraded to 24 when you can, get involved with those apps if pertinent. And we're going to wish you all the best for the Friday and the weekend. If you're in Adelaide, try to stay dry. And if not, I hope the weather is very clement for you as well. Thank you very much and goodbye.